It all started on a sunny August day in 1969 when drivers commuting down a busy Southeast Expressway in Boston were shocked as they saw three powerful locomotives forcibly enter the roadway and gouging massive 3-foot deep grooves in the tarmac. Today we examine the story of Boston's runaway train. Let's start at the very beginning. In the 19th century, when the Pennsylvania Railroad was one of the largest and most powerful railways in the United States. The Pennsylvania Railroad contributed significantly to the development of the American Northeast as a whole. However, in the 1960s, cars dominated. Additionally, planes became a viable option after World War II for long-distance travel of people and goods. With that in mind, the previously unchallenged railroad companies started facing increased financial difficulties. Pennsylvania Railroad was no exception. One of the most experienced railroad executives in the world, Stuart T. Sanders, was brought on board to mitigate the situation. It seemed that the best solution to resolve the mounting financial issues was to merge the Pennsylvania Railroad with the equally struggling New York Central Railroad. The deal was first proposed in 1957 and later approved in 1962. Sanders joined in 1963 and was tasked with finalizing the fusion. It then took a few more years to iron out the details, and the two companies finally merged in 1968, becoming known as the Penn Central Transportation Company. But the bigger question was, how could all three locomotives make their way onto the expressway simultaneously? Well, the answer is simple. They were connected. In fact, connecting two or more engines to provide more power for hauling big and heavy cargo is standard. The technique, called multi-unit operation, makes operating a few locomotives as a single unit possible. This in turn allows the train to move over uneven terrain, and so on. Anyhow, on the fateful day of August the 21st, the Penn Central crew was preparing the three engines to haul freight from Dover Street Yard in South Boston to Albany, New York. This 170-mile haul goes through several significant elevation changes, including the Berkshire Mountains, with some inclines reaching about 2,600 feet. Shortly before 3 p.m., the three locomotives were fueled up, their engines running, and awaiting a signal to approach the freight area to pick up their cargo. According to eyewitness accounts, the three locomotives began moving on their own, despite having engaged brakes, and started circling around the Dover Street Yard loop. As the engines picked up speed, they moved to a short dead-end spur, a short secondary railway line that branches off from a more crucial route. Being unable to stop the speeding locomotives, the crew decided to jump off before it was too late, as the three engines continued to accelerate. Having reached a speed of approximately 30 miles per hour, the leading train easily broke through the chain link fence at the end of the spur line and continued onto Frontage Road, later crashing into the highway. The first train crossed the northbound lanes of traffic before stopping in the middle of the road. The second one stopped on Frontage Road. Then, the third diesel engine came to a halt right behind the second locomotive. Although no one got hurt, the timing of the whole thing was quite inconvenient. Rush hour was about to start, and even back then, Boston was prone to major congestion. Then another question arose. How do you even remove a train from a highway? Well, basically, the Penn Station crew pulled back the third diesel, which was relatively close to the tracks. For the other two engines, they had to build a temporary track and use cranes to maneuver the 125-ton machine onto the rail. But here's the kicker. No one really seems to know the reason behind those mysterious runaway trains. The crew claimed that the brakes were engaged and that they followed the standard procedures. However, not even 1 year after the incident, in June of 1970, the company filed for bankruptcy. The merger failed to save it. It might sound shocking, but the management borrowed money to pay dividends to the shareholders. Even at the end of the line, they desperately wanted to maintain the appearance of success. After bankruptcy, Sanders attributed the failure primarily to increasing governmental regulation, which made it very hard for railroad businesses to innovate. At the time, it was the most significant corporate failure America had ever seen. Penn Central's infrastructure was already in shambles in the 1960s. The federal government was trying to salvage whatever was left, and in 1976, created Conrail, or the Consolidated Rail Corporation, which was tasked with managing the leftover resources. By the 1980s, the railroad industry underwent deregulation via the Staggers Rail Act, which in some ways actually put a certain amount of faith in Saunders' prior claims. It allowed railroads more flexibility, especially when setting rates and managing operations. And with that, Conrail eventually reached profitability and went public in 1987. While some might consider the runaway train incident merely a freak accident, it could also be interpreted as a sign of impending corporate decline. Well, not recorded anywhere, it is possible that the chaotic merger led to unclear or lacking safety protocols. The crew abandoning the runaway train might also point to insufficient training. After all, a runaway train is a railroad worker's worst nightmare. Every employee should be prepared for such a situation. But beyond that, due to severe infrastructure problems and years of deferred maintenance, a brake failure could also occur, although it's hard to imagine it happening to 3 engines at once. There was no follow-up investigation, and no one was even held accountable. Finally, it's possible that Penn Central was not paying its workers on time due to its severe financial problems, which could indeed have created a culture of recklessness and a tendency to ignore issues. Now, I'm sure that at least some American rail fans will be watching this video, so perhaps you can contribute here. Help us solve the mystery. Do you know why the Boston runaway train incident happened? Have you come across more reliable research on the topic? Or maybe you just have some interesting theories? If you do, leave them in the comments section below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching, and until next time, this is Ryan Sokash, signing off.